Before I finish speaking, someone somewhere in South Africa will be raped. What allows this violence to take place? Do culture and religion create gender roles that give men power to violate women? Do our politicians and police sweep rape under the carpet? What about the rape culture in our universities? Have we given up on protecting women? With me to discuss this are Brigadier Bafana Linda, who heads the Family Violence, Child Protection and Sexual Offences Unit in SAPS. Dr. Sizwe Mabizela, Vice-Chancellor at the university known as Rhodes. Chief Xolile Ndevu from Contralesa, Tlaleng Mofokeng, medical doctor and sexologist. Lihle Ngobozi, student activist, also from Rhodes. Sherilyn Dudley, Chief Whip of the African Christian Democratic Party. Bafana Khumalo from Sonke Gender Justice. And finally, Elizabeth Peterson from the South African Faith and Family Institute. And in our audience are young people who are passionate about women's rights and about tackling gender-based violence. Welcome to you all. And you at home can have your say, share your thoughts on rape via Facebook, via Twitter. But before we begin, take a look at this.
Someone is raped in South Africa every 4 minutes. Only 1 in 9 of those rapes are reported. Victims include women, babies, boys and girls, lesbian, gay and transgender people, and even men. Why is this happening?
Men are encouraged and socialized into a world where women are less than, are there for their use, and are there for their own pleasure, and are a way in which they can express rage and power and oppressiveness.
Minky Mokwe from Ennerdale is 51 years old and a rape survivor.
I've survived 8 rapes in my life. I was raped at the age of 3 until I was an adult. I didn't stop blaming myself because sometimes when someone wants to rape me, I wouldn't even fight. I'll just say, take what you want. I was just hopeless and all those things.
In popular culture, when brides vow to honor and obey, that often includes a duty to satisfy the husband's sexual needs. Could this be part of the problem?
Women are told constantly to submit to their husband in all things. So you have Christianity entrenching patriarchy, and then you have culture, which already had patriarchy as well, being reinforced by Christianity.
Cultural prejudice extends into the criminal justice system and to our political leaders. Despite all the laws and campaigns to protect women's rights, many women are scared to report rape to the police. Could this be because there is still a confusion about who is to blame when a woman is raped?
Obviously, the man is always at fault. Okay, the man is at fault. Why rape? But then when you ask men who have raped, why did you do this? They say, hey, the way she was wearing, I thought, Sometimes they say, wrong signals are sent. We have to try to minimize the reasons for men to do the wrong thing. If it's me, I would say, ladies, maybe men's eyes are all over. He's a man, he knows. They want to see. So it depends how you... If a man says the way she is sitting, I see what I should not see. And some people say things like that, So we need to try and minimize the reasons by saying, sisters, if these guys are trying to make you an excuse, let's ensure that we don't give them an excuse by doing what will not send wrong signals.
Blaming women for giving off wrong signals ignores the fact that victims include babies and the elderly.
Do we have an appointment on Saturday? I can't hear.
When politicians and celebrities are accused of sexual harassment or rape, do their accusers have any chance of a fair hearing?
Many of these high-profile cases, if you think of the young woman who a number of years ago had reported a case of rape against Makaya Ndin. Makaya is now celebrated. Now, I'm not talking about the merits of the cases, but she was completely vilified. If you think about the young woman who laid a charge against Vilakazi, the soccer star, she was completely vilified. Think of the Bill Cosby case. Women never win. And the message that sends is, if you report this and if you go public about this, you are going to get the same kind of treatment as these women.
Minky also felt there was no justice for her.
I couldn't went to police station because people like to discriminate, and then sometimes we will find out that some police are not good. If people are raped, they will say, "Why were you there? What were you wearing?"
Minky's taken back her power by working with other rape survivors.
I've helped other rape victims in my community, and I would like to do more for my community, because rape is taking a major part in the side of Johannesburg. Every week someone is being raped in any day.
Thousands of students around the country have confronted rape culture on campuses, taking power into their own hands and confronting the authorities, even using shock tactics where necessary.
You will hear us. We will fight. We will hold jump. We will do what. We will walk around naked. We will do whatever, and you will hear us.
Chief Xolile Ndevu, as a traditional leader, do you agree with the statement that when a woman is raped, the man is to blame, but there are some things that women can do to prevent men from raping them?
In most of the instances, men are the actual the perpetrators in the very same situation where a woman is raped. There is no instance where a woman is raping a man, but a man rapes a woman. I don't think it goes with our culture that men has to do that, because even when we're growing up our young boys, we always teach them as to how to respect women, how to respect their sisters and brothers, how to respect their siblings.
And what do you think about the statement that there are some things that women can do to prevent the rape from happening?
Yeah, that could happen, but you know, for the fact that men always have more power than women, maybe sometimes it could become very difficult for a woman to protect herself from the incident.
All right, Sherilyn Dudley, you're a Christian who believes in family values. What do you think?
Well, clearly the clip Reverend Meshwe was speaking in was a conversation, and one part of that conversation was there, and he speaks also as a pastor.
What do you think of the statements that he made, that I as a woman have to watch how I sit, I should be careful how I behave, and not sending up the wrong signal that may give off the impression that I want to have sex?
Rape is a crime. There is no question about the fact that every individual has authority over themselves. They do not have authority over another individual. As a mother, I would want to see my daughters, and as a mother of the nation, I would want to see my daughters respecting themselves in terms of how they present themselves. But that has nothing to do with the message of inviting people to rape.
I'll have to come to you, Lihle. Do you think that there's ever anything a woman can do, whether it be not respecting herself, to attract rape to herself?
No woman goes out there and says, today I'm going to wear a short skirt because I want to be raped. Sure. No woman wakes up in the morning with that intention. So what the issue here is more the heteronormative and heteropatriarchal society that we live in that prioritizes certain power dynamics. And so the only reason that the Reverend can say that is because he then probably ascribes to the assumption that women are property. And if you are property, as women, then it doesn't matter what I do because I don't have the right to my body. I don't have the right to expressing my body in any ways that I feel, but because I don't belong to myself.
Yeah.
I belong to man and I belong to society, and therefore I'm rapeable.
And he also said that, you know, men have sexual urges that they can't control. And of course, we as women have to work with that. How does that make you feel, Bafana Khumalo?
I would have advised Reverend Mishwe that the scriptures is very clear on this. Jesus says, if your eye gives you trouble, deal with your eye, because that's where the problem is. And don't project it to the other person. For me, I agree with Lihle, because the issue is about our patriarchal society, which continues to assume that women belong to men.
And Dr. T, I mean, what about these men's urges? I mean, how real is this issue? Is it true that there are men who simply can't control their urges?
Look, there is no such thing. And we need to look, at rape as part of the bigger societal issues of gender-based violence. And I think the culture is such, and the reason why we say culture is because it's normalized. So when people catcall you or call you by what you're wearing, or hey, big thighs, or, things like that in the streets, people laugh at that. And we don't realize how much that impacts women psychologically, emotionally, mentally, and it restricts our movement with that.
I'm particularly disturbed by the idea that there's something that I could possibly do to send off signals that could potentially attract me being raped. I mean, does anybody want to say something about men being portrayed as beings who cannot control their sexual urges? Anybody in the audience?
Us as men, we do have sexual urges and we are turned on by looking at women. And you women, you also know that you want us to be turned on by you. Today we've got men that are married and...
So I'm sorry, what do you mean we women want you to be turned on by us? I'm confused.
Yes. I'm married to you. I'm married to you. My functioning of manhood is turned on by seeing. It's turned on by eyes. And even the Bible says that if you cannot control your body, rather get married. So it means
what? What if your wife doesn't want to have sex?
If your wife does not want to have sex, you cannot have sex. You have to love your wife.
Dr. Tlaleng, I'm very disturbed. What about these poor women who are married to men who can't control their urges?
And people think because they married you, also linked to the culture and some of the things around lobola and how people negotiate that. And some people use that process of lobola as a stepping stone to abuse, for women to being submissive because I gave your family cows. When women go back to their families and say, guys, I'm experiencing abuse, whether it's sexual assault, whether it's physical abuse, whether it's emotional abuse, what do the women in those households say? And
so let's be clear. Women, wives do get raped in marriage.
Yes.
It happens. There is such a thing as marital rape. Dr. Mabizela, I'd like to bring you in here.
Every person has a right to his or her bodily integrity. We are not animals operating on the basis of instincts. Yes. I think that is insulting to men to suggest that because you are men, you operate on the basis of instincts, you see, you want to do. That is unacceptable. Yes. And I'm not one of those. And I really...
Sounds to me like we're describing dogs. Yeah. More like men.
Well,
so we've got some gentlemen in the back who'd like to... It's an insult to dogs, you say, Bafana. Who are the gentlemen that had their hands up?
I'm a former abuser. And I've done part of the things that I've done, that have been spoken about. I feel we men, we want to dominate. We want to take everything that is there.
And as a former abuser, where do you think the need to want to dominate actually comes from?
It comes from you. It comes from the surrounding that you live in. If you grow up as a child without morals, you'll never have morals when you grow up. It will start from the house, what you see. If I see my uncle touching my little sister at the back, I'll see as a right thing. We don't have the right models as men. Oh, no. We only have negative role models that are only feeding us the negativity inside.
That's an amazing revelation that we've had. Thank you very much for your honesty, sir. Lihle, what do you say to the issue of culture having something to do with it?
I mean, I think there are three things. There's, well, based on the conversation, there's Christian conservatism, firstly. And then there's cultural conservatism, particularly in our African cultures, right? Which is infused by an imperialist understanding of the world because of colonization. So if you look at our cultural sort of context, where I'm Zulu, Zulu culture was not always a masculinist culture. It was only through an imperialist, colonial, missionary conservatism that came through that constructed whatever is effeminate as other, and that which is not effeminate as that who has the ability and the right to rule. But then you also have the issue of, particularly in our culture, rape that is particularly targeted against masculine-presenting lesbians, as well as transgendered women who present themselves in the effeminate. So what is happening there culturally? Because to my understanding, I mean, I don't think our African cultures have always been homophobic.
Chief Ndevu, surely even after what Lihle has said, it would be okay then to consider having a gay man in the leadership at some point, no?
Well,
did you just roll your eyes? Or a gay woman, yes.
you know, we are African people. We've got our own things that we believe in, like your Intonjane, Ukwaluk, and all those things. We must not then confuse the fact that there are rape instances and then there's culture, and then we tend to say because people are raping, then we must dwell with culture.
What about the culture, Yogtwala? I'm not even sure where that culture came from.
Ukutwala was not meant to make people rape. Ukutwala was not meant to make people abduct young girls. Ukutwala was a common phenomenon between the two families, wherein my family would look into a particular family and see if that family is a progressive family in terms of...
When did it evolve? Because we abduct women now. Yeah. Women get taken, children, 12, 13, 14.
That's exactly what I'm coming at. Now, you've got people that are actually criminalizes our own beautiful things.
Dr. Talek.
Yeah, an important part of, I think, what we get to understand as rape culture and as culture of African people. We're not saying that African culture is rape culture. No. And I think it's the word culture that then sometimes with people sort of miss what we mean. And I think anything that is culture, that is aiming to uplift women, whether it's through virginity testing, it has to be done within the context of the law because reproductive rights are human rights. And therefore we cannot use, for example, and say, well, young girls, you must remain pure and you must, and run away from all these boys. And we reward boys with bursaries to go to school. But we say to girls, we'll test you for virginity every time you come home so that you can then deserve an education. That's what's wrong with the culture.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, after the break, we speak to the police about their response to rape. Don't go away.
Are you a man enough? You hold the girl down against her will. You took her clothes off against her will. Then you raped her as young as she is against her will. What kind of a man are you?
Welcome back to The Big Debate. I'm Masachaba Ndlovu. We're talking about rape and why so many women, children, and vulnerable people in South Africa suffer this crime, and why so many perpetrators get away with it. Lindiwe Dlamini has been an activist for many years. Lindiwe, thank you so much for joining us on The Big Debate. Tell me about your activism work.
I call myself a social justice activist. Mainly, I fight for rights of women and children and the LGBTIQ+ community. In the project that I run in schools, an anti-bullying project, I have young girls who come to me and be like, Sis Lindy, we are dealing with this. Like, sometimes I'm expected to go and do solidarity HIV tests with some of these girls because they're scared to go and do it alone and they're scared to speak to their families about it.
And how many of the women that you know that you deal with have been comfortable to go to the police?
Well, one.
We have Brigadier Linda here with us, who's a senior member of the police. And I'd love for you to tell Brigadier Linda why young women do not report rape in this country.
Brigadier.
Yes, ma'am.
it's not on what your department is doing, you know. You can't be asking people questions like, how can you be raped? You are a lesbian, you look like a man, you know, because those are some of the cases that we've gotten. And they'll be asked questions like, no, you cannot be raped. What were you wearing? Where were you going? It doesn't matter. And there's no justice.
Standing for me, if you don't mind, Linda. So, Brigadier, we have a serious problem because women don't trust you, they don't trust your people. What do you intend to do about that?
Master Chaba, let me say this. The SAPS has re-established 176 units, specialized units that deals with crimes against women and children. We've got different divisions. We've got our frontline police officers, which is visible policing, which are receiving the cases for us. The case gets referred to us as detectives. Myself, I'm a detective. Whatever we speak to me, I need evidence. If you say to me the police in Hillbrow are corrupt, give me the name. We have the inspectorate division that deals with poor service delivery. Then we subject that person into disciplinary hearings. Some of them have been fired.
All right. So, Lindiwe, I think you should just come around with me if you don't mind. You wanted to respond to the Brigadier in terms of what he said so far.
Yes, it is not right that you're saying you have 100 and something units that were opened, yet when you go, people will go and report cases, then they are told there's no rape kits, they are told there's no counselor on call, and like you find somebody who's going to be walking up and down and there's no privacy around it. And like rape is very shameful, you know, it's a very shameful crime. You feel dirty, you know, and having to speak to this police officer when you're reporting a case, you're taking a statement, and then they're gonna call the other one, Mlawuzi, come and see, you know, like come and hear this. It's like re-traumatizing the victim over and over.
Thank you so much, Lindiwe. Thank you very much for that.
I do want to respond. If there is a corrupt person in any area that you know,
who do we give the name to?
We have different numbers. At stations, we have got complaints desk.
Should there not be greater visibility in the police station to say, if you are not being helped by the people here, call this number? Because there tends to be a group mentality at police stations. And that's the honest truth. They have each other's backs at the police stations. First and foremost, is it men or women who deal with rape cases in police stations, especially the units that you've set up?
In the units, we have men and women we're dealing with.
So how do we know for sure that the men that work in these units do not carry the same sort of ideologies of the men that we saw in the opening insert?
I know that because they have to be police officers first, undergo basic training. Secondly, they have to attend a detective course we call the ROC, Resolving of Crime course. Thirdly, then we have got a specialized course for those ones who are investigating. As a result, I haven't had most of the complaints coming from those units. They are sensitized. On a training itself, we've got different stakeholders who are not really from police environment, who come on board to train them.
All right. So Dr. Tlaleng, the Brigadier has spoken about all this training that's taken place, but somehow it's not filtering down to the police stations.
Rape is an emergency. It's a medical emergency. And no one should be, in fact, going to a police station. There should be hundreds and thousands of these centers all over South Africa where you have psychologists who are on call 24 hours a day on the premises. Doctors themselves must be trained. My own colleagues avoid treating rape victims because they don't want to go and be expert witnesses in courts. And that can only be changed if the health sector itself takes rape as an emergency as a big deal so that they can then actually train the doctors, train the nurses, train the police, the security guard.
As a matter of fact, we'll take it one step further here on the big debate. Brigadier, would you be willing, if we went with you to Treasury, to ask for more funding for our Thuthuzela centers, to ask for whatever it is that the police need in order to make sure that the conversations that we have here don't end with just a conversation? Would you be willing to do that?
Very much so.
I'll come with you.
We are looking forward to have more resources.
Now, a number of politicians and celebrities have been accused of rape or sexual assault. How have the police reacted? We know a case recently where a prominent politician from the Western Cape was accused of sexually assaulting his female assistant. It appears that the police initially dropped the charges before collecting any evidence. Now, Brigadier Linda, without asking you to comment on the specific case, why do these kinds of things happen?
I think we need to understand the criminal justice system. We work hand in hand. We investigate, we take our docket with investigation in it into the NPA, and the NPA decide whether to place the case on the roll or not. So we have a role to play, but it's a value chain. They have to take it to NPA. NPA decide whether they must prosecute or not, looking at the evidence itself.
Wow. So are we saying, could it not have had anything to do with the fact that this is a prominent individual? I mean, let's be honest, public figures get preferential treatment in these cases, don't they?
But the police cannot decide on the case. The decision to prosecute and not to prosecute lies with the NPA, not with the police.
You see my idea of having those contact details on the wall of every single police station?
Yeah.
This is where it comes in handy, because this young lady could have said, you don't want to help me? I will so-and-so. And this person is going to take this case further. All right, so we're taking audience comments now.
In Masichaba, it's been 10 years. I still believe Kwezi. The reason why I'm not accusing anyone, I still believe her. Because exposing yourself that you've been raped, it's a shame in itself. So I don't understand why we get to the police station and be asked the A, B, C, and D. The justice system has a special preference, special treatment for those high-profile people.
All right, thank you very much. And what message does it send when we vilify the accuser? There's a gentleman at the back who'd like to comment.
My comment, again, with the Kwezi case, and it's not to the NPA, it's not to the justice system, but to religious leaders and traditional leaders. So the justice system said Kwezi was not raped. But then it's a case of a man who slept with his friend's daughter. And I think both religion and culture says it's wrong for a man to sleep with their own daughter. In African religion, for example, my friend's daughter is my daughter.
Thank you very much. All right, very briefly, we need to go to an ad break.
Yes, what I'd like to say is that, especially to men, if a woman is wearing a short skirt, it doesn't mean she deserves to be raped. She's not asking for it. What about women who are old enough wearing long skirts and are being raped? I'd like that for the government to have harsh laws on the culprits of rape, especially rapists.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for highlighting the issue that rape is broad, it's extensive. Not just women in miniskirts get raped, babies are getting raped. Elderly women are getting raped. When we return, we talk about rape culture in universities and why students had to protest naked on campuses. You're watching The Big Debate. Welcome back to The Big Debate on rape culture. In April, a list of 11 Rhodes University students accused of rape and sexual assault was published on social media. An outcry ensued on all sides. Angry students demonstrated against the university's complacency. Others were unhappy over what they called a trial by social media for the men named on the list. Student protests took place on several other campuses. Some were the so-called naked protests. Lihle, why did you feel the need to do something as radical as publish the names of people who haven't even been convicted of any crime? Yeah. Why didn't you just go to the Vice Chancellor?
Firstly, the RU reference list was published anonymously. So till this day, we don't know who actually put the list up on Facebook. So then what had happened is that students then got together and decided that we are going to go around campus finding the people who are on the list and going to their different residences and asking them to account as to why. But also because we saw the slow responsiveness of the university, we then decided that the most effective way was to bare our bodies on the streets. Because you know that the moment a black woman bares her body on the streets, everybody is shocked. But we also understand that a black woman's body has always been used as a political tool. And so we've decided that our most aggressive and effective political tool that we have in our hands at the moment is the very bodies that have been broken in this institution. And for me, I think it was a powerful tool for saying, even if I'm naked, I'm not asking for it. And what you also found is that there were men and women from the LGBTIQA community who were also bare-breasted, but the police didn't accuse them of being publicly indecent. So what are the gender dynamics that are happening there, where women who are naked are publicly indecent, but men who are naked, that's the norm?
Dr. Mabizela, why did it take you so long to respond to this crisis?
I think the earlier discussion clearly demonstrates that we have an emergency. It is unacceptable in our society to have people being raped. What it also demonstrated is the fact that our systems and processes and procedures were inadequate to deal with this very important and urgent matter.
That's awesome. What is the university now doing to deal with this matter?
Right. Immediately when the protest started, we set up a task team to look holistically at our response to the issues of sexual violence more broadly and rape in particular. Our students should feel confident that their university is there to support them, gather the evidence, and be able to make sure that the perpetrators are held accountable.
Why did it take a bunch of women stripping off their clothes and baring their breasts before the university decided to set up a task team?
What actually escalated the level of the protest was the publication of a list. That very same day, I issued a statement in full support, raising and also supporting our students in raising these very important issues. And I think that is important. Yes, we might have not been quick to respond, but here, this is where we are now.
Yeah,
and
because
we
part
must
of the
respond.
problem, if I may just interject again, is that you didn't remove these accused rapists immediately. It wasn't immediate, and that's part of the problem.
The people whose names appeared on that list, we cannot just simply summarily remove people without anyone coming forward to report that so-and-so violated me. And once...
So no one came forward?
People had not come forward out of that list, Maschaba. One person came forward and reported at the South African Police Services, and that was investigated.
So, Lihle, why protest when no one has come forward? Is this true, and are you satisfied with what the university is doing?
I mean, the issue is that the reason why that whole list was made is because of the inadequacies of the system. If the system was adequate, there was no need for people to put a list on Facebook. We had been able to say, Dr. Mabizela, so-and-so, so-and-so, so-and-so. The system works in such a way that it prioritizes the survivor and protects them at all costs, but that's not the case. So then what happens is that students have to resort to mob justice, as they call it, to take matters into their own hands because it's inadequate. But also at the same time, we need to think of the cost of coming forward is too high for the survivor.
What are your comments?
You do need to have due process. You can't just judge or prejudge. You've put together a list. These people may well be innocent. You've got to have, within the institution, you have to have various processes. You have to have disciplinary proceedings. You have to have an investigation process. You have to have policies. And perhaps this is what it took to get the system going.
All right, Dr. Mabizela, I will be coming back to you to just respond to what Gail and others have said. But we're taking comments from students now. Yes, ma'am.
I think in terms of these policies, as she has mentioned, is that the policies on their own are flawed. Flawed in the sense that you find in the policy that if you're a perpetrator of rape, you just move to the next department. How is that solving the problem in the institution that you're raping, but no, it's okay, we'll move you to the next department? Another thing is these policies are put in place, but students are not aware that these policies actually exist. What happens on open day is that they'll speak about the sports that happens on the campus or the race culture, not that there's a policy that's in place for when you're actually attacked or victimized. Now, these policies as well are not simplified or normalized for the normal student to understand that this is what rape is, because now you're in a situation where you're raped and you don't even know that you're raped because the policy does not appeal to you as a normal student or a normal student on the ground, which for me is very problematic in these institutions. And that's all I just wanted to add.
All right. Dr. Mabizela?
We do have policies and processes, but what the protests demonstrated was that they were not adequate, and we are attending to that. It is very important, Masichaba, that we respect the Constitution, and that Constitution accords every person the rights. Yeah. And if people had come forward, we would have acted against those people. But in the absence of that,
sure.
it is very difficult because we are a constitutional state.
I'd like to bring you in here, Elizabeth.
I was going to pick up on what the students are saying, because I think the students are asking the right questions, the critical questions. The policies that we have, the legislation, is not suitable. In this, if you look at domestic violence, for example, there's a protection order, but it is void of understanding the dynamic, the complex dynamic of intimate partner abuse. We must understand that our policies, we need to dismantle that and understand what is it trying to support. You know, we insist on human rights and we forget to insist on human dignity and human agency.
Thank you.
Yeah.
After the break, the last word from our audience. Welcome back to the big debate on rape culture. I'm Masachaba Ndlovu. Are we doing enough to challenge the gender roles and attitudes which normalize rape culture? What do you think?
This entire debate has been about how men treat us, how men disrespect us, how they've been conditioned to mistreat us, how they've been conditioned to behave in certain ways that violate us. But as women, I think we need to take responsibility for how we treat one another as women. We are cruel to one another. We call each other names. We are each other's gatekeepers. From the very level that we're speaking about, where it starts in the home, where is that mother when that child is being raped? When that mother finds out that her child has been raped, why is she not shouting it from the rooftops and shaming whoever has raped her child? When it comes to us in university being raped, where are our friends? Where are they standing when we are victimized, when we are ostracized by these men who mistreat us? We need to stand around each other and protect each other as women. Men will take that message and they will translate that message and think to themselves, women are off limits. We need to be off limits by our own definition. We need to start protecting ourselves as women.
As women, yes, we need to work on our relationships between each other and amongst each other. Because I know right now, if I were to leave based on how I'm dressed and I was outside and I was raped, there would be women who would say that I deserved to be raped because of how I was dressed. I'm taking this word that we are associated with, this I'm taking it and I'm emancipating it and I'm taking away the power from it. Just not define who I am. Has no power. If you are going to call me a or how I'm dressed, it's a reflection on you. Do you understand?
It's fundamental to always keep in mind that the perpetrator who is accused remain innocent until proven guilty. I was accused of rape when I was in tertiary for political reasons because I decided to contest the SRC. And I respect the fact that in your case it might have been true, but I've not perpetrated that crime. In as much as we may pontify the idea, which is very important, that we should protect women, in as much as we may pontify the idea, the principle of innocent until proven guilty remains. I've not raped anyone, but I was accused of rape. So I'm remaining innocent until proven guilty, and that's the principle I'm standing for.
In my opinion, it's unfortunate that we're going to have to end up radicalizing issues that should be faced without us having to do anything, like walking around naked in the streets or putting people in reference lists around on Facebook and social media. It's unfortunate that people have to actually stand up in that sense, as opposed to just being believed straight on that I've been raped and I'm a survivor of a rape. Thank you.
I would like to start when it comes to the family. Let's say you are raped with one of the members of the family, e.g. your uncle. Then you're coming forth to tell a family that he has been raped you. Then the family will be like, no, we have to protect the family. Don't let this out to the police stations. Then my question is to men, are you a man enough? You hold the girl down against her will. You took her clothes off against her will. You put her on the dried brown grass against her will. Then you raped her as young as she is against her will. Then you left her. Then after you are calling yourself a man. What kind of a man are you? Then after you were looking at us for our respect and our love. Why can't you start loving yourself? What kind of a man are you? Are you a man enough? Get that questions, man.
When we return, the final word from our panel. Welcome back to the big debate. Now, a final word from our panel. We'll start with Elizabeth. Elizabeth, very briefly, your thoughts, closing statements.
I think it's important that faith communities must understand the crucial role that they play. Religious leaders must know who they're preaching to. There's a perpetrator listening, there's a victim listening, and there's potentially a child who's listening, who's witnessing and experiencing this. And we have to demystify those easily misinterpreted scriptures. We've got to populate scriptures that actually speaks to the dignity of everybody, a woman's body as well as a man's body, and that in that place there's no place for abuse or violence.
All right, thank you very much.
Three very important things. One, education and awareness raising so that we are all fully aware of what sexual violence is. Secondly, we must provide support for the survivors of sexual violence and be sure that they are able to report. And thirdly, that the perpetrators should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law and be taken out of our society.
It is true that we all need to take responsibility because we all have cultural thinking that may or may not be helpful. But as far as obviously the issue of religion is concerned, where that is causing any kind of a problem, people who are actually involved in religion must take responsibility. Then just to speak about the legislation, right at this moment, there is a very high-level task team looking in depth at all legislation over the last 22 years. And the deadline for submissions for that has been extended now until October, I believe. So it is very important that anybody here who has actually gone into the detail of what is missing and what will make the difference, because that's what legislators need.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, I think our society must differentiate between the rape as a crime and culture, because those are two different things. We can't really, abandon our culture because it will be explained as rape. But lastly, I think the people that are victims of rape must report those cases to the police, and then those cases must be investigated, and those people must be brought into book. So it must not be a perception, or whenever a person has to think of accusing a person, it goes like that.
All right, thank you very much.
Just briefly to say that rape is very traumatic, psychologically, emotionally. Some people die from some of the wounds that they experience while being raped. And we need to realize that we cannot continue to put the pressure or the responsibility on someone who's been raped to go and produce the evidence. The police need to be empowered. They need to have the skills to go and get the perpetrators to prove that they did not perpetrate the crime. I think for too long, it's on mothers, it's on cousins, it's on rape victims themselves to do investigators. And I think it's very unfair as well when it comes to the structural violence that women continue to experience in terms of hospitals and clinics where they go to report these crimes, where it's highly inadequate in terms of post-exposure prophylaxis, where a lot of the children and young women end up with HIV. A lot of them end up with pregnancies from these very rapes, and they've got absolutely no options in terms of terminations of emergency contraception. So we need to realize that the rapists themselves are a problem, but what are the other structural violent things that women are then secondarily experiencing the trauma as a result of inadequacies? And unless we call it what it is, it's not, we were delaying response, or maybe there's not enough money. That is violence, and you are part of the violence against women.
Thank you very much.
I think it's worth mentioning that policing gender-based violence is very complex. We are talking about crime within closed doors. We're talking about crime within the dark alleys. In most of the cases, in my 25 years as a detective, it's hard to get an eyewitness who saw what happened. And when it comes to court, then you need to prove beyond a doubt that the person did it. That's why we had to get DNA report to prove that the person, yes, is the one who did it. So that's why we, ourselves at the Benefit Sovereign Police Service, do say that ourselves that we cannot win this battle alone. We need to partnership. We need to strengthen with our partnership with stakeholders so that we can work together, because somehow, somewhere, somebody sees when a crime is committed. And we need that to prove our case in court.
Just to add on what Dr. was saying, I think there are two things. We need to do just a systemic overhaul of the legislation in relation to rape and gender-based violence in this country. Because one, it's not sensitive to the survivor, and it's always in protection of the perpetrator. Two things that indicate this. One, the evidentiary burden that a woman or a survivor has to go through. It's ridiculous. The framing of the legality and the proving and the onus of proof and all of those things are not empowering. In actual fact, they're disempowering to the survivor. So I think we need to have a serious conversation about how we actually employ feminist legal interpretations of how we think through this issue. Because all of these, to me, read as highly anti-feminist, highly anti-woman, highly anti-rape survivor. And particularly just protecting masculinity in all its forms. So I think a real systemic overhaul of all legislation, I think that's a starting point for us.
Bafana Khumalo, your closing statement.
My last appeal is to the men. I think we need to be very sensitive as we talk about these issues so that we do not actually continue to re-victimize people that have been victimized already and be violent in terms of how we are approaching issues. We need really to be much more sensitive. Rape is never, ever acceptable under any condition. And we cannot make excuses for that. And how we approach it, how we engage it, I think as men, we need to take a few steps back and be a bit more humbler and listen more than we talk. And it will help us as a society.
South Africa has a pandemic of rape and sexual violence, and it seems that the core problem is power. Some people in our society have the power to violate others, whether they be women, children, LGBTI persons, babies, or family members, or employees. And it seems we will not defeat rape culture until every single one of us stands up and confronts the abuse of power, which makes rape possible. Is that ever going to happen? You decide. From me, Masachaba Ndlovu, thank you for watching The Big Debate. Before I finish speaking, someone somewhere in South Africa will be raped. What allows this violence to take place? Do culture and religion create gender roles that give men power to violate women? Do our politicians and police sweep rape under the carpet? What about the rape culture in our universities? Have we given up on protecting women? With me to discuss this are Brigadier Bafana Linda, who heads the Family Violence, Child Protection and Sexual Offences Unit in SAPS, Dr. Sizwe Mabizela, Vice-Chancellor at the university known as Rhodes. Chief Xolile Ndevu from Controlesa, Tlaleng Mofokeng, medical doctor and sexologist. Lihle Ngobozi, student activist, also from Rhodes. Sherilyn Dudley, Chief Whip of the African Christian Democratic Party. Bafana Khumalo from Sonke Gender Justice. And finally, Elizabeth Peterson from the South African Faith and Family.
To do the wrong thing. I would, if it's me, I would say, ladies, maybe men's eyes are all over. He's a man, he knows. They want to see. So it depends how you... If a man says the way she is sitting, I see what I should not see. And you know, some people say things like that. You know, so we need to try and minimize the reasons by saying, sisters, if these guys are trying to make you an excuse, let's ensure that we don't give them an excuse by doing what will not send wrong signals.
Blaming women for giving off wrong signals ignores the fact that victims include babies and the elderly.
Do we have an appointment on Saturday? I can't hear.
When politicians and celebrities are accused of sexual harassment or rape, do their accusers have any chance of a fair hearing?
Many of these high-profile cases, if you think of the young woman who a number of years ago had reported a case of rape against Makaya Ndin, Makaya is now celebrated. Now, I'm not talking about the merits of the cases, but she was completely vilified. If you think about the young woman who laid a charge against Vilakazi, the soccer star, she was completely vilified. Think of the Bill Cosby case. Women never win. And the message that sends is, if you report this and if you go public about this, you are going to get the same kind of treatment as these women.
Minky also felt there was no justice for her.
I couldn't went to police station because people like to discriminate, and then sometimes we will find out that some police are not good. If people are raped, they will say, "Why were you there? What were you wearing?"
Minky's taken back her power by working with other rape survivors.
I've helped other rape victims in my community, and I would like to do more for my community, because rape is taking a major part in the side of Johannesburg. Every week someone is being raped in any day.
Thousands of students around the country have confronted rape culture on campuses, taking power into their own hands and confronting the authorities, even using shock tactics where necessary.
Institute. And in our audience are young people who are passionate about women's rights and about tackling gender-based violence. Welcome to you all. And you at home can have your say, share your thoughts on rape via Facebook, via Twitter. But before we begin, take a look at this.
Someone is raped in South Africa every 4 minutes. Only 1 in 9 of those rapes are reported. Victims include women, babies, boys and girls, lesbian, gay and transgender people, and even men. Why is this happening?
Men are encouraged and socialized into a world where women are less than, are there for their use, and are there for their own pleasure, and are a way in which they can express rage and power and oppressiveness.
Minky Mokwe from Ennerdale is 51 years old and a rape survivor.
I've survived 8 rapes in my life. I was raped at the age of 3 until I was an adult. I didn't stop blaming myself, because sometimes when someone wants to rape me, I wouldn't even fight. I'll just say, take what you want. I was just hopeless and all those things.
In popular culture, when brides vow to honor and obey, that often includes a duty to satisfy the husband's sexual needs. Could this be part of the problem?
Women are told constantly to submit to their husband in all things. So you have Christianity entrenching patriarchy, and then you have culture, which already had patriarchy as well, being reinforced by Christianity.
Cultural prejudice extends into the criminal justice system and to our political leaders. Despite all the laws and campaigns to protect women's rights, many women are scared to report rape to the police. Could this be because there is still a confusion about who is to blame when a woman is raped?
Obviously, the man is always at fault. Okay, the man is at fault. Why rape? But then when you ask men who have raped, why did you do this? They say, hey, the way she was wearing, I thought, Sometimes they say wrong signals are sent. We have to try to minimize the reasons for men